My name is Luke Lombardi. I'm going to be moderating this session. I'm very excited to be here. This is my first time at Build Reuse. It's a really great vibe. I'm excited to talk about. We're going to be sharing a little bit about the commercial reuse efforts that have been going on in New York City in the last year. And personally, I'm also just very excited to learn from this group and connect with folks here. So the overview of our talk. So it's going to be a panel. We're going to give some very brief introductions, and then have short presentations, 3 to 5 minutes each. And most of the time we'll be having a moderated discussion with time for Q&A at the end. So please, I mean, this seems like a fairly enthusiastic group, and we certainly, I might have my hands full keeping us to 45 minutes with the perspectives up here. But yeah, please have some questions for us at the end. And with that, I'm going to introduce myself and then we'll popcorn around. So Luke Lombardi, I live in San Diego and I work for an engineering consulting company called Burrow Happold. My background's in structural engineering, and I'm also a co-chair of the SE 2050 program. So, and actually I got into circularity, and I'm sure many others did, via Dave Binnink. Dave invited me to a construction site when I was visiting Seattle 2 years ago. And I was like, oh, I'd love to see your reuse facility. And he's like, we're taking down a house, like just come get your hands dirty. And yeah, so Dave, if you want to introduce yourself, and then we can go Jimmy and Shafali.
Oh, yeah, deconstruction Dave, my official introduction language. Is that better?
Much better.
I'm deconstruction Dave. So yeah, 33 years of constant, like nonstop reuse and deconstruction, and now we rebuild buildings in addition to taking down buildings and fun stuff. So we train people all over North America. We just helped start our 105th circular business. Yay!
Woo! Jimmy?
All right, Jimmy Mitchell. I've been 20 years with Skanska, contractor. And my journey is basically, I love this stuff, and I've always tried to be the advocate who does reuse, salvage, and that kind of thing. And after doing it for 18 years or so, I'm now kind of our national circularity reuse guy. So and enjoyed being a part of that.
Shafali Stumpy, I'm the Director of Sustainability and Associate Principal at Dagmar Architects, or a New York City-based architecture firm that does, well, you'll hear what we do, but my background was primarily in affordable housing for about 18 years, and a big part of that was understanding that sustainability is integral to the way that we design buildings, and I was able to leverage that in the last few years into this larger platform of sustainability. And I'm newer to circularity than everybody else at this table, but it's been really exciting to learn from these guys.
Great. So, there we go. Yeah. So Burrow Happold, there were some great introductory comments, and I think the early presentations around the momentum that we have right now, and this being a particularly key moment in this movement. And so I think Burrow Happold represents a bit of that, where we're a big engineering consulting company, over 3,000 people globally. And we represent these large kind of companies that are circularity or deconstruction is sort of new to them. Like we're new to the space. Like I mentioned, this is my first time here, but it represents a huge potential or opportunity to scale up a lot of this work. And so our company initially, I think, so we're UK based. So a lot of our initial research and the business came from the UK folks who are mainly based in London. They're already doing circularity letters, and there are more requirements in Europe. And I think our company has found there's a business case, and they see a future in this alternative way of building. So that's kind of found its way into the U.S. and particularly New York City with through NYCEDC, which is New York City's Economic Development Corporation, have been real big advocates for this. And Burrow Happold about a year and a half ago released this Green Economy Action Plan, which I think was a real important step to showing the importance of circularity in buildings. The number one, so this action plan, it outlines an economic case for transitioning to a cleaner, more sustainable ecosystem. And in that, the analysis showed some potential for 300,000 jobs by 2040. And the number one kind of sector of influence was buildings. And the number one action to start was publishing this clean construction design guidelines. And as part of these guidelines, I thought they did a really nice job of laying out some clear goals. These goals, I think, are fairly familiar to a lot of us. You know, they're around diversion. So the three goals being C&D, diversion, 75%, focusing on concrete and soil, 95% recycling or reuse, and requiring 25% minimum low carbon materials. And I would say actually that we probably have some work with these goals of telling a better story, but for us, I think it was a major catalyst for just starting the conversation and thinking about what infrastructure for circularity is required in the city. So we all were brought together by a pilot project for this circularity guidelines called Spark, which you'll hear about a bit more.
So as I said, I'm with Datner Architects. We're a women-owned architecture firm in New York City. Our work is what we like to call civic architecture. So we have a studio that does affordable housing. We have a studio that does multifamily housing, mostly affordable. We have a studio that does transportation and infrastructure, and we have a studio that does sort of cultural work, which includes education. And so as part of that, and also as a practice, we're really passionate about sustainability, right? We're about 135 people, and of those 135 folks, 90 people are in our sustainable practice group. So I think like it's pretty clear that that's a big part of our firm ethos and why people want to work here. So we have, as I said, this internal sustainable practice group that has been really interested in circularity as sort of a concept, and how can we sort of set ourselves up to be ready to do a future circularity project. A lot of our initial research was revolved around mass timber. And then, as Luke mentioned, NYCEDC released an RFP for the Spark Kips Bay project, which really gave us an opportunity to talk about circularity in practice. So that's kind of, as Luke said, how we all came together. So the client is EDC, and the primary stakeholders are the City University of New York and a New York City public school. The project is currently a CUNY campus. So because it is in New York City and it is an ultra urban area, the campus is very vertical instead of horizontal. The design team is NYCEDC Architects is the prime, Datner is a sub, and part of our scope is the sustainability lead. And the circularity team is really Bureau Happold, Reuse Consulting, Dave, and ourselves. And really like the initial challenge was, how do we talk about deconstructing a 400,000 square foot building that was built in the late 50s? So it really was not built with deconstruction in mind, and there was still a lot of hazardous material, and it was very much and is very much an active college campus. But as you can see from these photos, there's like this wealth of material in there, and it was really exciting to walk through the building with Dave and with the Bureau team to think about, how do we start doing this, right? How do we document all of this? How do we put this together? And how do we sort of like generate interest in the market so that people will be ready to receive the material when we start work. So we're gonna, Jimmy will talk about it, but we're gonna start work in February. Yes. Okay. So basically, you know, what we did and where we are now is we did an audit of the existing building, which included kind of creating all of these tags and having this blue beam session. So teams of 2 walked through the entire building, tagged each room with the material that was in there, and provided some qualitative information about it. So then we documented it, we discussed strategies of what we could do with it, and then we discussed potential outcomes. and then waited for Skanska to come and tell us what to do next. And that is my segue.
Thanks. I'll go quickly here. And I just want to tell a few reuse examples that are kind of hot off the press for me personally. And these two here are very traditional reuse examples. The top two is the Nashville, Tennessee State Legislative Building. And of course, through the planning phase, you try to, there's these beautiful granite pavers that are there. And through the planning phase, we try to figure out a way to reuse these items. And it doesn't really work out very well, but we have this great network of folks like here. And one of the great network leaders of our group in Nashville is Keith Lewaiso with Vanderbilt. And so reached out to a few others as well and tried to find a home for it. And we didn't. But then right when we started demolishing it, they reached back out, and Keith is working on a hopeful like volunteer living building challenge project in Nashville that is a perfect home for it. So post, outside of contract is kind of not the way we want the industry to go. We were able to pull it off, and that's a picture of the materials waiting for Keith's future project there. It's a nonprofit farm outside of Nashville. This, the bottom are from Atlanta, Georgia, where I live. And there's this Nabisco plant that is off Murphy Avenue. It's this industrial corridor where this Nabisco plant in the 1950s, the lobby witnessed a lot of civil rights meetings. And so when a new pharmaceutical company bought the property and was rebuilding, there was a lot of drive to try to save some of those lobby materials to kind of carry over this civil rights history from Atlanta. And so we, pulled it off, had a Oakland Cemetery new visitor center project that I was helping on, and some of the old green tile ended up going into the new visitor center's bathroom. This one was a little more organized, but again, kind of out of contract. But then fortunately, it was a substitution for the new tile for those bathrooms. One thing within Atlanta, Shannon Goodman, our great fearless leader and chair, she's the executive director of Life Cycle. I helped her start that 15 years ago. We've had a great experience in the trenches together. But it's important to find these nonprofit partnerships if you have them in your community. Was working on a hospital project not too long ago, and when we were doing a sanitary tie-in, discovered these like Civil War cobblestones, and ended up giving them to Life Cycle, who then gift them over to Trees Atlanta, and a key off the Atlanta Beltline says, "Welcome to Trees Atlanta," out of this historical stone. So here again, these are all examples of like industry doing a good job, but off contract. Moving on to a couple project examples. I've spoken to this group about Candida before, but we did 28 reuse examples. They're all in the spec, part of the pre-construction process, saved us money, and was not a time issue either. And at the end of the day, we only threw 49,000 pounds in the landfill in the process of building the building, but we reused 57,000 pounds. So because the Candida building existed, there's less waste in the landfill. My favorite example here is the Tech Tower job. But then on to our Kips Bay project in New York City. This one, has the desire of being a contractual one. The EDC set it up that way, but it's going to be a great example because the cost is, not a part of this process. So we're not able to spend an extra penny on reuse. So all the reuse we're going to accomplish is going to be because it makes financial sense. And we're going to end up hopefully accomplishing a good bit. We've had material audits, networks. We had like a bid day, but instead of it being a bid, it was an expression of interest in material. And so a good number of groups are interested in the materials. And actually tomorrow on site, 6 entities are touring it to kind of make the next step to save materials from the building. So, all right, I'm gonna hand it over to Dave.
We're right on schedule. Okay, Dave Enick. Now, when I looked at this project that they're referring to, I looked past it. I'm almost immediately looked past it and I said, if we can make this project work, can we make all projects work in New York City, right? So that I took on that responsibility of doing that. So so what I did is I created the New York City Circular Construction Network just out of thin air, you know. And all of a sudden we have 18 structures and we have these really great projects, and the buildings collectively weigh 100 million pounds, you know, and that's just like the first few months of doing this, you know. So, but what it is you look at a material that they were showing you, and then you look at a project, and then you look at a practitioner, you know, like a store or something like that, and then you look at the network. And so I'm looking at all of those things at the same time for New York City. We're really trying to create the infrastructure necessary to support these projects, right? We can't just do a project, because what happens when the next project comes? So it's too much work to do this over and over again. We need the infrastructure that's necessary to support it. So we're connecting people, projects, and practitioners from throughout the region. And if you're in the region, please come to me after this. You don't have to come up here. It's just, you know, but like, hopefully we can talk later about this, because there's so much going on. Now, what we're trying to do to create our own infrastructure is create a reuse innovation center in Brooklyn. We picked out a location. We have a team working on it now. We don't have any money, so you might hear a little bit about a fundraiser that we would love it if someone would contribute a little bit, because we just need to get past that initial startup, and then we think it's going to really flow. So we've identified 20 revenue streams that the Reuse Innovation Center could create. And remember, if you haven't, I mean, I've talked about this at past conferences. The Reuse Innovation Center is a circular business cooperative where we have, you know, we might have up to 30 businesses involved, 30 circular businesses serving the New York City area and projects like this, so that when the next project comes along, we'll be ready. That makes sense.
Perfect. Thanks, Dave. Jonathan, I think we're good. Okay, and we do actually, we're working on a project together, and we do like each other. So we're
Most of the time.
I think it's still okay. How many, actually before, it's still pretty quiet, right? How many people, New York folks, do we have an audience of you? Okay, very exciting. Yeah, we should bring it all on stage. Okay, so Dave, you've outlined some pretty high ambition of the project, 100 million pounds. How do we really take the next step from that promise to practice? How do we all really pull this together?
Well, I would say that, you know, this is year 33 for me. I don't worry about the pounds as much. I mean, we happen to test, you know, like audit the building, so we know what they weigh, but really we got to start somewhere, you know, and it's like everyone there that I've talked to seems like they're in a holding pattern. They're kind of like, this is too hard. We can't do this on our own. You know, this is too complicated. So they don't do it. And I'm saying, well, can't you just start with something, right? And so Spark, the idea is, can we start with something? And other projects, like we have a library, we have Governor's Iron, we have, you know, the climate exchange, we have these different projects where it really is like, we just need to stimulate activity. And then if we can start things like the Reuse Innovation Center, they will help you in the future reach that next level, because we'll work together on it instead of you having to figure it out for yourself.
And Jimmy, same question to you as someone you've had some experience and success in the reuse, larger scale.
So I mentioned some of those examples that happen kind of out of contract because doing the due diligence there is really helpful and it shows the market that it's possible. Where we need to go, of course, is where it's on contract and the subcontractor market is mature enough. I see a lot where in the pre-construction phase, you're like, hey, how much is it gonna cost to remove the marble from the wall? And the response to that question is $1 million. But then they start tearing you down that day and you're like, hey, since your smell isn't approved yet, we've mobilized, how much would you charge to take marble down? And they're like, oh, it's a good use of my time today. Maybe nothing, right? So, yeah, so I think, you know, we need these examples of due diligence that eventually mature the market to the point where, you know, you're getting like a $5,000 bid instead of a $1 million bid.
Following any thoughts?
Yeah, I think like, my perspective is a little different, only in the sense that I don't have the many years of experience that you guys have, and I think that as architects, we were really excited about the concept of designing for future deconstruction, which is really great because you get to control everything, and as architects, we like controlling everything, but that's not the reality of where we are, right? The reality is that there's significant existing stuff that cannot be reused for whatever reason. And so how do we tackle that challenge of deconstructing something that wasn't designed for that? And I think that like this idea of being really flexible and like and really just understanding that any win is a win, right? And it's not about like, what is the perfect of the enemy of good? Like that's not really what it is about. And I think oftentimes we put a lot of pressure on ourselves to be super successful about everything because how can we demonstrate to the next project that this will work if we were not super successful? But it does require this reframing of what defines success, especially when it comes to deconstruction in a very like urban area. I think that, I'm, as I said earlier, and I keep repeating this because it's really valuable. I'm the newest to this conversation. And I feel like we decided to do this on the most challenging project possible. Very large building that has a lot of hazardous material in it, that has a very strict budget, is paid for by public funds, and is being built during a time where there's a lot of uncertainty and it's difficult to price out how much of this is going to cost, not only because there isn't a market, there aren't like sort of anecdotal market data to help support the cost, but also because people are like, I don't know what the construction industry is going to look like when you want me to start in February. So I don't really know what this is like and what is this going to cost. So I think just this idea of, I totally forgot what the question was, but
Constrained by a very tight site. And
Yeah.
so I will say, this is an active pilot project. This is not.
yeah, I don't say any success stories or anything like that, but it's just this idea that like, it has really framed this idea, forced me to rethink how we define success and like what the architect's role is in all of this, and just a good reminder to us all that we need to.
Yeah, and I'm gonna pick some of that and toss it back over to Dave. Dave, what is your reaction when talking about some of the challenges, and particularly around this topic of cost, when people talk about deconstructing, it's gonna cost this much? What's your reaction or rebuttal to that?
Yeah, it's interesting. Jimmy and I were talking about the marble, right, and how it was looking pretty expensive, and then I reflect on how contractors, and over my decades of doing this, that contractors are resistant to change, and they anything that seems like a specialty item, they tend to bid more and things like that. And you hear a number like that, it's going to cost a lot of money to save the marble, and it's going to make it non-viable. And then I said, well, I'll just come and take it for free and I'll sell it back to you. Why do I do that? Because if I have any confidence of saving 75% of it and I can do it quickly, somebody else is saying, well, I've got to save all of it. I'm going to build $1 million. So it's like, we've done this before. When we reach a roadblock, we go around it. Like, we never stop. I've never stopped in 33 years. Nothing can stop us from saving things, like we won't let this issue stop us, if it's something where you decide you don't want the marble because of the uncertainty, then we'll take the marble, But if we take the marble and then we say, we'll sell it back to you for $250,000, then everybody wins, right? But the only thing is you're not controlling the process like you'd like. So I just think it's something where I have a lot of confidence from doing all this work for so long. I have confidence in the procedure. I know that we as an industry can tackle things like this. This is a big project. I mean, 500,000 square feet in the middle of Manhattan. I mean, it's a big deal.
I want to add an inspirational center. In this marble scenario, you know, storage of time is the big part of the money here. And so, you know, if the marble can be removed and taken to your center right away, and it's out of mind, that'd be a big help. You know, in Atlanta, we developed that with Lexington Building Center, and it's a big help there, because the burden is just that moment, and you're not also stewarding material for years. All of this.
I was gonna, say that role of other projects, feel free to jump in, Shafali. Seems really important in, you know, having, it's not like, it's very infeasible for one project to take down the material, store it for 3 years, whatever, during the time, that it's in, during construction. But one thing that, so Skanska has quite a few projects, and as a group, we've also, done quite a bit of outreach to, like, the ecosystem, the circular ecosystem in New York. Shout out to Reclaim, NYC, for, you know, there's some folks in the audience. But Shafali, feel free to say what you're gonna say, or jump in on that.
I think I was gonna say like kind of the same thing, is that, you know, like I was talking about architects needing to have control and like this idea of being flexible. So I think in our minds, the initial story before Skanska came on board and before even like Dave really got involved, was that this idea was we're gonna take this stuff down, we were gonna store it, we were gonna reinstall it. And that was our story of circularity, and it was gonna be this beautiful story that was very visible. And we would be able to say like, look at all the circularity that's in this building. But then, you know, money is a real thing, it's a real concern. And in New York City, the cost of land is astronomical, not that it isn't elsewhere, but we were really stuck with that. And then, you know, Bureau did a bunch of carbon analyses of like, okay, what if we should, you know, trucked it to Pennsylvania and then trucked it back? But the project still had to hold on to the cost of storage. And so we also needed to talk to the design team, the future building design team, and they were like, oh, we want them in slabs, so we can put them in the elevator lobby. It's like, fine, that's insane. This is like 2-4-inch thick slabs of marble, and you want them to take it down in like these beautiful 3x4 slabs so you can reinstall it. So this idea of like, what else can we do with it? And can it be crushed down and used as aggregate, and to be used as terrazzo in the flooring or something like that? And I think like that kind of thing where it's sort of on the spot innovation. And again, this idea of flexibility and not being so stuck in this idea of what is that successful demonstration of circularity was a hurdle that as a design team, we were constantly dealing with.
Yeah, there was quite a bit of a learning curve. Like I said, it's new, especially to some of the bigger architecture engineering companies. It's a different process. So you do need to introduce some of the terms. There's a lot of definition sharing, and even the sequencing of the design materials. Like the designers actually weren't picking out their materials at the time when we were saying, look at this beautiful palette of used materials that you have to choose from. So with that, I think I was gonna, Jimmy, if you could share a little bit of like in your engagement with some of those other designers. You also have some other big projects. What have you seen that has like shown or encouraged you for reuse opportunities on this project or more?
I'll talk broadly maybe. The integrated team is really important with architects. There are, the ideas, I think have gone both ways in my experiences. There's been times where like, I mean, it starts at demolition, right? It starts at like, oh, here's this project that's coming down. There's slate tile. What do you, this is something you can use. And then the designer's like, oh yeah, how about here? And then I talked to this sub-market and I'm like, that's a crazy idea, I'll do that. And then, well, why? And, but because you did this way more efficient, and give that feedback, and the designer's like, oh, I love that idea, let me run with it this way. That's kind of, I think, the best way it works. And because then it's more affordable if you're getting that market feedback. Otherwise, you tend to be too specific, and then you get the burdensome high pricing from the market, because you kind of want to work together with the market, to find out what's affordable. There's definitely a way to do reuse with it costing less. There's a way to do it where it costs a whole lot more.
Yeah, and I think in our workshop, so part of the guidelines requires a few things. It requires a site audit, a reclamation audit, which personally I actually found one of the more kind of important things, because as you're walking around the sites, you're getting different stories. You're talking with the people who spent decades in this building and what it means to them, capturing some of that embodied history. And then you also have to do a couple of workshops, a sustainability workshop and a circularity workshop. And I would say that this topic in particular really does spark a lot of enthusiasm and creativity amongst designers. Like people want to be able to reuse stuff. And so I guess I say that to circle back to Dave, I might kick this to you. Where do you see with your reuse center kind of focus and low hanging fruit to build a business case, or some of these products that people are excited about, or you have a history of a good building businesses, but
one of the challenges of this project is how can we start a new reuse center in Brooklyn that doesn't adversely affect the rest of the circular economy locally? So we're actually waiting to hear what other groups are saying they want to, then we'll probably mold ourselves around what's left. It's a weird approach, but it's something we just have enough confidence. We think that we can let the local groups get what they want, and then we can see what's left over and try and work with it. But the Reuse Innovation Center is meant to be a remanufacturing operation as well, and so that we can create products out of whatever we salvage, and those products would be asking architects and designers and the citizens of New York City, like, what is it that they need, and then we would try and create a product based on that, that would come from these materials. So I think the main thing is that we're looking at something where we can, the idea at Spark is that we go in there for free, right? We go and we salvage things for free. So if we're doing that, then we're looking for things that, are going to generate like $300 of product per labor hour spent. So there is a limit on what we can save, And part of it is the project team, like I'll be coaching the project team about like, here's something you could do that would help us be more productive, because we're not getting paid to be here. So if you can remove any barriers, or if you have any equipment that we could borrow, things like that to make our life easier. So I think it's all part of a group effort where, but and of course, with an eye on the budget the whole time.
yeah, on that budget, Jimmy, you mentioned in your introduction that there's been some projects where you're like, oh, and it saved money.
Yeah.
Where are you most excited?
Yeah, so I'm excited where the future projects, or it's something like that, really challenging project at Tag at Cadena, where the reuse examples are just a part of the project, and there's not a lot of energy kind of wasted on the what ifs. Now, I remember early on in my career, I had to do this big assignment to justify LED lights, right? And that was a big consulting job, and it's kind of a waste of time, right? Like, it just made sense. Like, let's just reuse stuff and then make whatever we're doing cost less, and focus on that. And so I'm excited about that for the future. I also am very excited about this project because it is a $0 project. So any of these examples that end up becoming success stories, and I think we will definitely have some success stories, are going to be awesome, because they're like, wow, we can do this everywhere. And because it's $0, it essentially means that whenever somebody comes and takes a truckload of stuff, they're not throwing it away, so they're saving, we saving that much money.
Okay, I was actually going to get right back, pick up something, you said earlier, Shivali, which is around that defining success. And I would love, so we have, it was great to have the full people in the audience, during the keynotes. We have some city or county officials, people who, I imagine may be interested in having something like the circular design, construction guidelines that EDC has published. Tell me what you think about the goals for the process. So your favorite part or least favorite part, but what do you think about those goals as they are currently stated, and how would you change or adapt them that you think would be helpful for others?
Yeah, I think EDC should be commended for what they're trying to do here, right? So for those of you who are unfamiliar, New York City Economic Development Corporation is a nonprofit that basically helps distribute capital funds for buildings across the city. It's probably much more complicated than that, but that's the best that I can do right now. And so they put out these guidelines, and now it's a requirement for every project that is funded by EDC. So I think that in and of itself is amazing, because it's forcing us to have this conversation and taking out of the equation this idea that it's just not possible because you can't do that in New York. And I think that in and of itself is really a major hurdle that we have passed. With that being said, I think that there are some places where we could definitely be more aggressive. And there are some places that feel a little too aggressive. And the reason I say that is because, like, you know, all this documentation that it requires, I think is really helpful, because it forces us to stop and think about what it is that we're doing and what are our goals, and let's codify that so we have something to go back to as the design, as the deconstruction commences, as the design progresses, et cetera, et cetera. So, you know, writing that whole document has been really eye-opening for me. And it's given us an opportunity to collaborate closely with real capital and kind of like learn from people that impact this process, but are not necessarily architects, right? So it forces you to think about things a different way. The one thing that I would say is that I wish there was a little bit more flexibility based on the age of the existing assets. I think that's one of the things that we're really stuck with here, is there's a lot of like, there's steel in the building, but it's all encased with concrete. So it's like, there's nothing really we can do about it. And when I ask industry folks, they're like, well, they'll have to figure out eventually. I'm like, cool, but I need an answer now for a building that I'm working on right now. And so I think that I wish there was, like, especially early on. But at the same time, by forcing us to meet these metrics that every project will have to meet, I think we can, and by forcing us to document everything, we can demonstrate to other projects, like, these are the problems we had, so now you can be aware of them when you start your process. And maybe you have another way of thinking about this, or because of your building, you don't really have that problem. So anyway, what I'm hoping is that it creates this knowledge sharing infrastructure so that as a city, we can level up very quickly, because we're forced to share our failures and successes.
Yeah, it has been, I would say, a bit of a stress test, right? You have to start somewhere. And that's where I'm really, when I saw these published, I was a bit surprised, but also really enthusiastic. This is maybe the first step, but a long step. And yeah, Jimmy, you.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I went, but the one thing I think is really important about it, leadership that EDC has shown here in New York City, is especially if they stay consistent with it, stick to it. Investment takes time, and so with these guidelines, the future for New York City really is the subcontractor demolition subcontractor market will address it. And you know, through this project, we'll sit down with them and ask them and come to the nose, come to that's going to cost money, come to that, but then express the desire and the interest from their community, and that leads to results. And those companies will absolutely look at warehousing, and they'll do things to try to make the cost less in the future. They will do that. And I've seen it for, like, you know, the concrete world getting over carbon or whatever. So hats off to them for starting that process.
Yeah, that leadership, I think, can't be touted enough. And I've been thinking a lot lately about this this kind of funny TED talk that I saw probably almost 10 years ago at this point, which is it's called How to Start a Movement. And it's, if you haven't seen it, you should Google it and look it up. It's only like 5 minutes, but it shows the guy dancing at a music festival, and he's dancing. He looks like a crazy person because he's all by himself, and it starts slowly, but one person joins. And the video is really all about how the leadership is also the people who come next and supporting that initial person who has the courage to kind of look like a crazy person to build that momentum. And it ends and it's like thousands of people dancing. It's great 5 minutes, but yeah, actually a great thing. I think even your kind of Dave, the arc of the project with even like EDC, I think we've come a long way in the last year with some of the initiatives that you share with the audience today. Anything you'd add to that? The dancing like a crazy person.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I was a little slow. I was like, is he talking about me? The other thing is, whoever filled out the poll and said I'm banned in your country, that's one of the options in the poll I space there. I want to know who that is. Yeah, it's funny because I entered New York City at 60 miles an hour, you know? Like, I didn't go there ready to just put the brakes on and buy into everybody's story that this won't work here. You don't do this in the city. It won't work in the city. I said, you know what? This is the perfect project for this to work because there's on-site parking. And we have one building where we can be working for weeks, you know, not like going all over the city looking for scrap of material, you know. And so it had some viability right off the bat. But yeah, like already we've seen the network formed because of this one project, right? This one project was the stimulus to start the network. The network now has 15 projects. Where are those other projects from? They're not all EDC projects. I have a library, I have a museum, I've got private buildings, I've got homes. And it's starting, it's like they made the effort. It was so essential for them to remove one barrier, you know. There were so many barriers. They removed one barrier. They said, but maybe we can make this work here. And I said, I can work with that. You know? And so now we're starting to see some momentum if we can just keep it going. But it's going to affect the entire region. That's why I was saying if you're from that region, yes, I'm talking about construction junction, you know, like I'm talking about other groups that are farther away where this could have a trickle-down effect of this giant source of valuable materials that could become available to our industry on a regional basis, because it's too much for it all happening within the city.
Yeah, thanks, Dave.
I was just gonna say, like, you know, the title of our session is like piloting reuse at this scale. Yeah, I mean, and I do think that is a big part of this, is that as frustrating as it is to me, and you've heard me speak about this before, you probably hear the frustration in my voice when I talk about this entire process. It's forcing us to scale up really fast. But I think the kind of like a great benefit to that is it's demonstrating to other city agencies that it is possible to do work at this scale. And I think now we're hearing other agencies in the city say, like, we're interested in that too. And we're seeing more of that language about really paying attention to embodying carbon, not necessarily just from like a concrete or steel point of view, but also a whole life cycle point of view across the types of work that the city does. And I think that is
You're very New York Chipotle, and our California culture clash has been. So I have one last question, and then I will open it up to the audience for questions. But it's really around broadening our lens beyond New York, and how do each of you see these guidelines and this pilot project as an experience that can build momentum beyond the city? Dave.
All I have to do is look at Portland, Oregon, where we started a deconstruction effort there. And so I was called into Portland to start and to train all of the contractors and train all the workers and to create infrastructure, like starting new circular businesses. And what that unlocked was, there's probably 7 other cities that followed closely behind. They were just waiting for somebody to do it, you know? And it's like, I knew that would be true in New York City. I knew, I didn't want to pressure you guys, but I knew how much this means to the industry. If you can make it work in New York City, the saying is you can make it work anywhere, right? And so I think we need to document our successes and our challenges and things like that, and then just show that EDC is taking the leap and what that led to, and I think it's going to lead to multiple other cities giving it a try, starting with Boston.
Yeah, I mean, right now it's just helpful to have another example out there. Of course, New York City's greatest guidelines are very helpful. It's something you can kind of show off, and that helps. I do think that kind of the big home runs. One is a profitable business model that, like NYCEDC, we're nonprofit, right? I mean, I love the idea of turning to 14 across the country, but we need to make money in the planet, right? And then I do think the other bit of this, it is a very community-based mission. So maybe that model isn't going to work, and each city and community will, in the near term, create their own infrastructure.
Yeah, I mean, I think you guys said it, but I think this idea truly that, like Dave said, like, we're gonna do it on this publicly funded project using union labor, and on a very scrutinized project that is, you say it already, over budget. And so if we can make it work in any sort of way, right, however we define success, then nobody has an excuse. I'm sorry. I'm gonna be real New York about it, but like, honestly, if we can do it, y'all can do it. If this is just, it's not even up for discussion anymore. But I do think that it's sort of, in all seriousness, this idea that it forces you to focus on this hyper local infrastructure, I think is really exciting. And I think in many ways might be our best bet against the tariffs and sort of like uncertainty in global material, is that we are each one of these sort of nexuses in the US now has created this hyper local material market where we can kind of counteract some of this BS, I hate to say it, that's happening at the federal level.
All right, I already see some hands going up, so,
I'll help you.
you just take it.
If you guys share.
Excellent.
You're getting question number 2.
Jimmy, for you, you mentioned tomorrow there are 6 subs walking through. What are they looking at?
Yeah, a great question. Exterior, like hardscape stone items. They're looking at glass block, glazed block. Looking at interior wood finishes. They're looking at one thing I thought was interesting, a couple of skylights. And yeah, the big items that
Are they looking at skylights to repurpose them?
they are, every single one of these are only repurposed, so these are all the highest and best use, take it out, reuse it as it is. Yeah. The recycling is a later phase.
We identified 547 categories of materials between, this is America's largest deconstruction project that I know of right now. And it's in the middle of Manhattan,
Yeah.
It's 10,000 items just for starters, like fixed items and FF&E items as well. So you've got thousands of things.
But
Yeah.
the sweet spot here, it's gonna end up being like dozens of materials, maybe 50 or 60 of them out of the 500. So scratching the surface, but it's pretty darn good effort between the network that you put together, and the outreach we did, and then get real contenders to come and get materials in this market when they pull it off, I think it's gonna be. Yeah, and some materials, I mean, it's like, 1,000 square feet of that, couple thousand square feet of this. It's not like, if somebody is coming to go get a water fountain, it's a one-off item, but they're also wanting to go get 6,000 square foot of glass block.
Lots of questions, great.
I just wanted to say, I'm really excited. We did 260,000 square feet in Boulder, and everything's bigger in New York, so we are cheering you on. We're very excited.
Thanks so much. I'm Gabe.
Think of the better.
Okay. Hi, I'm Gabe Brenner. I'm Commercial Solid Waste Manager with the City of Boise. And we've had a deconstruction ordinance since 2021. It's required salvage, but it's only been for demolition projects. And we're looking to, expand new construction or tenant improvements, things like that. And I'm just wondering, from the city perspective, or from your perspective, what can cities do, especially smaller cities like Boise, that can really affect deconstruction the most? Is it like top down, like creating a thou shalt law, right? You have to divert 35% of on-site waste, or is it, empowering community partnerships to kind of do that work for you without having to write that law? Does that make sense?
I'm gonna go, sorry, I love opinions about policy. And I do think that we need policy to help start having this conversation. Because the reality is that like the free market right now does not give a crap about it. Right? And so like, it's not cool enough for some venture capitalist to come in and like swoop in with some AI algorithm, whatever, right? So I think that there has to be some policy in place that helps start the conversation. But I do think this idea of these public-private partnerships is also a measure of how that can be scaled up and how smaller municipalities can kind of work with organizations that already exist in their community by providing the support that they need, whether it's through grants or through land or through something to help make this more accessible. Because it's like, it's one thing to say like, hey, Google, do this, and then for them to be like, we can't afford to, for us to just laugh in their face, but it's another thing entirely for a nonprofit hospital to do it, and then and when they're like, we don't have money, it's like, okay, well, let's work on this together to figure out how we can pay for this. And I was saying this earlier to someone, I can't see if they're in the audience right now, but like, when it's policy, we have to find the money to make it work, but when it's not policy, we have the choice to say like, I don't have money and I can't do it.
If you want to add to that?
Yeah, I mean, we've helped 12 cities with deconstruction policies and programs, and things easily, 12, but not 20, I don't know. The thing is, sometimes they're not ready. If the infrastructure isn't there, then you're artificially changing the market. You're creating an artificial supply of materials by pushing deconstruction. And if there isn't a matching demand, if you haven't really prepared the community, the industry for that locally, then you can get an imbalance. Portland actually did have an imbalance, like they had too many 2x4s, for example. But I think that, what we're, we're going to be asking EDC for yet another help, to help us build up the infrastructure so that because they're meeting us halfway and we're trying to meet them halfway. And we just need to, if we can build that infrastructure, we can help keep the costs down. And then that makes it more viable.
But I think your other city friends like Florida and Portland are behind you is the best person to ask this question. And so, but one thing I would say, and I'll put my chair of the board of life cycle on. We had impact the city from the real estate of our warehouse, which has been important. Because it's a way that maybe like lowers our costs and that helps our profit advantage. And then the thing that we don't have that I think might have the least unintended consequences would be if tipping fees would go up.
Yeah.
Other than that, I think you're gonna potentially get unintended consequences with whatever you do, but also intended ones.
Yeah, and I think it probably shouldn't be a surprise that everyone, the the process is also not going to be a linear one, for a circular economy. But I just want to emphasize too, that, and this is more from, body department and LCA lens, that, the importance of these pilot projects in shaping policy and in making sure that, places are prepared. That a lot of times you need people who are kind of leading edge to show that it's possible to get policy. And sometimes that's public agencies, starting with their own projects. And sometimes that's private, sector that we will, but we're showing that this is possible, is feasible, our engineers, architects are ready to do it. So, just to say kudos to all the folks, particularly in this room, who are making that happen. So, I think we have time for a couple more questions, Emily.
Thank you. It's Robin Jansen with Urban Evolution. So I had a question. I love that you guys are focused so much on reuse, but I'm just curious on the decon side, and like, you talk about it being an ultra urban environment, so that's fascinating, like how that really works, but also budgeting, like, are you guys, you're through like the project, like you have the budget for deconstruction, like, it sounds like it's evolving. I'm just confused about like, how did that work in an ultra urban world? And how are you guys managing that at $0 or whatever?
Before I let Jimmy talk about like the actual pricing, I just want to say that the project came about after a master plan, and the budget was allocated based on the pricing based on from the master plan. And in the master plan, they did not include construction. They just included demo. So we started off in the hole.
And when was it?
Oh, and it was like, and that price, have you seen it? It's, I would say like 2 to 4 years old at least. So, and it didn't include like any cost of storage or anything. So we were already like, so when the first initial cost came in from our cost estimator before CDCG came on the job, our client was like, this is triple of what we had done. And that was a huge eye-opening moment for us. I'm sorry, this light is blinding me. I just want to see who I'm talking to. So, okay.
Hey, Rob. Okay, so we start construction, we mobilize February 2nd, 26. So this is a future project that has been under, deconstruction design. One way that we're staging it is the design of the new building. So essentially, tearing down a whole block of Manhattan, building half of the school back, I'm sorry, all of the school back on half of the block. And the over budget bit of it is the whole program, tearing the whole building down and building a whole new building back. And I mean, it's a $900 billion project. And so the deconstruction part, it's interesting how like, man, just give us $250,000 for the $900 million job, right? We could move mountains for you. But you know, it's real. It's like, hey, you can take program away from students and nurses and stuff. So no, we don't want to do that.
I think the other tricky part, Jimmy, I'll just state where, upfront, be more upfront about it, is that the deconstruction is tied into the new construction of the project. So this project has 3 components to it. One is deconstructing of the existing asset, which is the entire city block. Another one is all the new infrastructure, the new square, a new pedestrian bridge. And then the third one is the building. So since deconstruction is happening first, if that one's over budget, the other 2 projects have to like lose program or figure out how to make up that gap in budget. And if they had just made it a separate project, it would have been much easier to have that conversation, because then we wouldn't be doing these concessions with like 20 other people in multiple offices of like, okay, well, I want to do that, but if I do that, then you can't have an auditorium.
So we put all this deconstruction ideas down, had sessions, did goals, tested the market, did the due diligence. And essentially anything that costs money is off the table. And the way the design is broken up into the future building, we also don't have like a honeypot of future building budget yet either. For example, that marble example, let's say the future lobby would have a marble wall from the existing building. That is not yet in stone. So I don't now have like a $75 per square foot material price that is part of the budget to remove and save the old stuff. So we had to totally disconnect that. And so, yeah, I mean, I have to say though, from like the innovation center idea, we're gonna be removing tons of materials, donating it, to these, community, organizations that design these materials, and they're gonna use them.